Okay, I'm going to quickly go over my migration from regular Vim configuration to a Lua-based one, and also following a little bit about what's going on in, I guess, the NeoVim ecosystem around using a few plugins to really provide an IDE-like experience with NeoVim. Now, my personal usage of Vim on like at home is edit some Terraform, edit some shell scripts, and edit some Ansible. It's not very sophisticated, so probably would be best to look at where am I coming from, and then we can sort of see where I've gotten to. So let's quickly go over my original Vim configuration. So I have a few plugins that I'm using. So Control P to have some form of fuzzy finder, Nerd Tree for a way of navigating a code base through the directory structure system. If I like, so Control P is great when I know what I'm looking for. Nerd Tree is great when I want to explore because I don't know what I'm looking for and I just want to look around. A few of Tim Pope's plugins because he seems to be pretty bright and does some good sane defaults. Vim Sleuth is interesting because it pulls in editor config, some Terraform highlighting, and a color scheme. So as you can see, there's not really very much language specific stuff going on here because I'm not generally coding any. I was going to say anymore. That sounds. I haven't been coding much at home for anything. Most of my technical stuff that I'm doing at home is configuring my Raspberry Pi, which is configuration file editing and such. But I am looking to get back into coding a bit more, and to get back into coding, I wanted to sort of dust off the old tool belt and see what's sort of more modern these days. And I saw that people are using NeoVim in a very slick IDE-like way that's fast, which is something that I prefer. I want something fast. I do like IntelliJ. I've used Visual Studio, and I think for what I want to do right now, which is most likely going to be Go-related stuff, I think NeoVim is going to work fine. And I try to use VS Code, and it always irks me when I launch it and it just gives me a bunch of pop-ups. And maybe that's due to the fact that I'm not opening it frequently enough to deal with them, but I don't really like it when the editor is yelling at me all the time. I sort of want to tell the editor what to do. I don't want the editor to just broadcast all the time. I like to ask my editors things. So I do like a powerful editor that can inform me on things, but I think I can get that better with NeoVim more than I can with VS Code. Let's see what else. So, and if we look at the configuration, these are very basic configurations, like just, line numbers and such. And I've got my background configuration things. Yeah, nothing fancy here. Just a couple mappings for how I like to do stuff. Something stolen from Gary Bernhard's configuration, which is a very overly simplistic way of getting some tab completion, which is pretty clever. And that's it. And you can see this is my first sort of commit where I'm showing where I'm going to bring in some Lua-based configuration as well. But this is the first commit in this whole thing. So you can sort of see that I'm not coming from a very sophisticated Vim configuration, which is hopefully sets me up well for this migration. So I just want to point out some of the inspirations as well. One is this fantastic video series, NeoVim IDE from scratch. Not super long, like you can really get through this whole series in a couple hours. And I would also like to just comment, like, this migration took me, roughly a day of like getting into it, stepping away from it, watching a few videos, stepping into it again, because I really want to have a decent understanding of what I'm doing. Another great post was this one from Bennett, former colleague at Pivotal. They are doing some fantastic stuff on their blog, and I really liked their write-up on their setup of Vim using Lua. Really cool. And lastly, Primogen.
So I am
some channel that I just recently saw, and he's a fairly energetic fellow, but he did a really good just 30 minutes of 0 to LSP in 30 minutes, which was pretty good. Again, very densely packed information. And I knew that there was something called Lunar Vim, which just looks fantastic. Looks like it's a full-blown IDE with all the trimmings. I wasn't really ready to jump into something that was all pre-configured. I wanted to learn a little bit on how that works. I might eventually use Lunar Vim in the end, but I wanted to use this as an exercise to at least understand how Lunar Vim is made. And the person that did the NeoVim IDE from scratch also made Lunar Vim. So it's a good history lesson, I guess, on how they set things up. Another thing to note, actually, while all three of these resources they're different, so they implement things slightly different. Some use different plugin managers, and also it seems like things are moving really quickly. Like versions are changing, the syntax of configuration is changing, and so I actually enjoyed seeing these different implementations of NeoVim configuration, which helped me sort of not get locked into it must be a certain way. So it gave me a good range, diverse configuration options to go. It's like, okay, maybe I don't need to do this. I can do it this way, and I don't need to follow blindly what that person's saying. And because I have used at least Vim for a long time, I don't feel like I'm out of my depth, at least with the editor in itself. I'm really just learning this new way of configuring it, and I thought using Lua is probably better because it is just a general purpose language that's used all over the place, especially in games. And maybe one of the things I do want to get into is perhaps some game modifications, and understanding Lua and having the tools to edit Lua sounds pretty good. Okay, so with that long intro done, what type of, well, maybe I should just load it up and show it to you. So let's load it up. So you can see that I'm running 0.10, and that's actually relevant because some of the settings that I'm using require a fairly modern version. And we're somewhere in here. I should have prepared a little bit in advance, but here we go. So I am using version 10. That is like the bleeding edge dev version. And I can, let's see. So instead of Nerdtree, which I always liked as a file explorer, I found that just using netrw is sufficient enough for my purposes. One thing that's nice is that my editor config is honored by NeoVim natively, so I didn't need a plugin for that. So that's sort of cool. I can also do something like Lexplore, and then they'll open up on the left. Okay. Now, the other plugin that I mentioned in my previous system was Control P. And the modern way to do things these days is telescope. So if I do my leader key, FF, so find file, I can look for stuff in here. And if I look for, let's look at Vim, and we can sort of see here's my NeoVim configuration. And let's start from the beginning, my init Lua. So this is the equivalent of what my init.vim was before, but now it's in a Lua configuration. And we can see that we have like a require statement here, and some mappings and some options. Now, what I found interesting, so if we look at, I think I mentioned it here, in the Primogen's configuration. So one thing that I ignored of his is that his I guess you could call it the entry point of the configuration is a one line that goes to this one. I'm fine with that configuration as well. No problems with that. But I think I personally like putting things in the init.lua. Fewer files, fewer levels of indirection, but that's a total nitpick. And so this is just one area where I'm going. I'm not following the instructions to the letter. I'm going sort of my own path a little bit. Now, if we go. Nothing really to see here. There's nothing. Oh, one part that was sort of nice is that I wasn't sure how to do this part in Lua. So I just wrapped it in a Vim command block, and this just executed my Vim script just fine, which is sort of cool. So I can still have my background setting works just fine out of the box. So if I go Command-Shift-D to go into dark mode, go back here, and I got dark mode here as well. But let's stick with dark mode for now. Let's go back into init Lua. Nothing else really to see here, but let's look at, for example, the package management. So in order to do that, I'm going to go space FF. I should probably have one of those things that shows the keys on the screen for another day. I have that in plugins.lua. And Packer is one of the tools of choice, and I saw there's another one called Zero or Lazy Vim, or it's the one that Nat used. I can't remember what it's called. I think they link to. Do they link to their repo? Add Packer to that config. Oh, you used Packer? Interesting. I swear that they were using a different one. Maybe I was mistaken. Anyways. And so this is how, rather than using plug that I was using before, this is using a tool called Packer, and I can go like Packer sync and potential breaking change. Interesting. In version 2 of LSP0. All right. Did I not sync LS version 2? I may have been running version 1 this whole time and totally forgot about it. So I may have just broken stuff. That's another thing that I saw with all the examples. People were using version 1 of LSP0. We'll get into LSP in a second. So here's how I added telescope. And another thing that I did steal from the Primogen is that rather than having a lot of require statements, he put things in this after plugin directory, and these get automatically loaded when Vim loads. And so I took something similar to here. So he has this telescope Lua, and if I go to mine, you can see I'm following the same directory structure. But I took the default sort of maps that are recommended by the telescope team. Trying to like limit the scope of how much I'm having to learn here. That's all fair enough. So if I go back to, what was it? The plugins. Then there's Tree Sitter. So Tree Sitter allows for syntax highlighting. Now, what's interesting with Tree Sitter is that it just really covers everything. So before I had a Terraform specific plugin, but now if I go to my, let's say, TF, no, what is my thing called? I think it's, yeah, that's the one. So I'm getting my Terraform syntax highlighting from Tree Sitter here. What's also interesting is that because I have LSP, if I have LSP info, we can see here that this is telling me that, oh, it has detected that this is a Terraform file, and it's attached a couple clients to this buffer, tflint and terraform ls, so the language server. And if I go here, we can see that we have a Lua language server started. We have tflint and terraform language server. It's pretty slick. That's a lot of more processes than normal. Whoops. But yeah, this is in WSL, and so you can see that I don't have a ton running here. But oh, that's a good point that it does point out Mason. So if we go back here, quit that, Mason. Here's how I install language servers. So I can go here and I'm like, oh, there is Ansible. I haven't, let's, Ansible language server. Oh, Angular and Ansible. I almost didn't notice the difference there. So I'm going to install the Ansible lint. So I just hit I, and I'm going to the Ansible language server. I'm going to install that as well. Let's see how this looks when I open up an Ansible file. Nifty. Okay, so let's quit that. And let's go back to the plugins. So Tree Sitter is giving us this beautiful syntax highlighting. Telescope is allowing us to navigate. Now LSP0 is the language server that is able to connect to the language servers that are managed by Mason, and gives us interesting auto completion and such. And I was actually surprised at how well this just worked out of the box. So let's go into my LSP config as well. So this is just more Lua configuration that showed up in here, and I think I pretty much took what Primogen had here, with a few modifications. And so now if I go to, let's go to a bash file. If I go to op agent, yeah. Cool, so now if I do something like ba, oh, 0 clients attached. Okay, so I may have broken something, which is to be expected with the, so I can do LSP log. Okay, it did see the syntax error. Okay, now I guess it took a little while to load. So this is the one thing I am finding is that because of these things that are happening in the background, sometimes the feedback isn't happening as fast as I want it. So now I can see that there's a W there, and so that's saying if I do VD, so it clearly doesn't like what happened there. All right, now it's happy. And if I go here, if I go echo, and now we can see we're getting some suggestions from both the completion. Oh, that's something I forgot, that the other component of the LSP that comes in handy is the completion engine. That's the plugins that are coming with that too. And you can see, okay, this is coming from a snippet, and this is coming from LSP. Nifty. Let's look at the Ansible and see what happened there. Let's look at main playbook. All right, tree sitter parser for YAML. Oh, okay. So you can see here at the bottom that tree sitter automatically installed a YAML parser. Cool. Now, can I do go to definition? Let's see. Not to the secrets. Let's go to this one. Nope. Okay. So it's a little clunky. I don't have it completely working properly, but again, what I had before was very basic, and I was leaning on a lot of the built-in Vim navigation stuff. And so before, what I would normally do is I just do fuzzy finder to go to that logging. So I can do the same thing here, and that works just fine. Cool. What else do I have to say? Like, I do certainly have a more complex setup now. But I think I have something that's small enough that I feel comfortable sort of iterating on. And it's already given me a little bit of value added, in the sense that like some of the completion stuff is really interesting. And in with the code that I have, like most of the code is self-contained in one file. I don't need something that's significant. But as I start coding a bit more, I think that should happen. So overall, I'm pretty happy. Let's get back. It's really bright in my room, so I need light mode back on. I'm pretty happy with the changes. If we look, so everything from here are the commits that I made in order to do this change. And that was me sort of tinkering away in an afternoon while watching those videos. So pretty cool. I think I'm gonna call my task here done, and hopefully we'll be able to, well, in future videos you'll ideally see my proficiency with this setup much better. But right now it's still a little bit clunky. I'm still learning it as I go, but I'm pretty happy with the migration so far. And who knows, I might just switch to Lunar Vim. But overall, I found this a very good exercise to understand what my editor is doing and what the tools are doing. And I thought it was a really good breakdown of like, what exactly do you want from an IDE, right? You want to be able to navigate. And so what we have that with a little bit of the tree sitter stuff, because that also helps with navigation. And of course, telescope. We want syntax highlighting. We want the code to be visually understandable, and we get that with tree sitter. And then we want to be able to have auto completion and such, and we get that with the completion plugins and the language server protocol plugins as well. And that really is it. So it's a nice composition of these ideas of what makes an IDE an IDE, and it is complicated. It's a lot of things to wire together, but to me, I think like it's a good breakdown of like what it takes to write your code. And I think all these components also help you as a programmer understand what it takes to write your code, because once you understand, especially when you look at some of the tree sitter playground stuff, and you see how it parses the AST, the abstract syntax tree, symbol tree. Ooh, I can't remember what that stands for. Showing my competency. But when you see that, you're like, oh yes, of course, the code is a collection of these symbols and such, and it parses like this. And I don't know. I felt like even though I didn't do any programming setting this up, I felt like I understand programming more just by seeing how does an IDE take all these things and give you a good coding experience, because all these tools have to know how code works. Anyways, that's it for this one, and I'll publish this ASAP.